Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of Authors First on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. And now, here's your host, President of the ArtistFirst Radio Network, Mr. Tony K.
And welcome aboard, everyone, to Authors First. Great to have you on board, and thank you for sharing our message with everyone you know on your social network sites. For your convenience, you can locate our guest content and past guests at ArtistFirst.com. We're always interviewing new guests and adding quality broadcasts to the network. This hour, it's my privilege to introduce author Debra Rufini, and she's joining us from across the pond. Let's give a warm welcome to our guest. How do you do, Debra?
Hi, it's nice to be with you.
Wow, what a wonderful time you're having as an author. Have you always had this love and interest of writing, Debra?
Yeah, I guess so. It spans back to, was never that good at it at school, but in later years.
Well, you know, people
older and wiser, yeah.
People come to writing at different times, different phases of life. A death, a divorce, a car accident, you fall out of bed and hit your head, or you begin a project and it gets buried and put away for a decade or two before you finally get the courage to revisit the subject. But do you come from an artistic family, Debra, or are there others in your family who write?
Not really, no. I guess it was my love of... I've always liked poetical song lyrics. So for me, Bruce Springsteen is a great poet, and if you feel strongly about a subject, you think, how would so-and-so write that? So I kind of guess it makes it more interesting and appealing when you think, I'd like to try that, and try to the best of how I could do it like they would.
Very nice. It is, I think every author tells me that they have a hero, a favorite author, a favorite kind of music, something that created this courage to move forward with a project. And
sure.
You're expressing the same kind of philosophy and love for the arts. I don't think there's anything out there quite like what you've written. Introduce the title and the concept.
Oh, thank you. That's very complimentary. Very flattering. I guess, my book, The Artist Page, is very short. It's a very small book. It can be read in the span of, 15 minutes, if you're a slow reader. And it's about a very clever artist, obviously representing our divine creator, who's produced a love gift for free for any of the takers. And, it's just a little group come into his studio and see the result of what he's produced. And but they're kind of quite short, like myself, to see the artist above his drawing board. And then, another group come in who are a bit taller, and they see him. So it's kind of representative of theists, atheists, and some kind of can't decide whether it arrived on his drawing board by accident or, was it, was there a hand behind this, So it's kind of, I wanted to be kind to atheists as well, because I think many times atheists can't see where we can kind of automatically judge that they're maybe in rebellion or, want to push God away, a God that they sincerely don't believe in. I kind of wanted to maybe get that across without it being sort of like a chick cartoon. The old chick cartoon booklets that are kind of drumming the fear into you rather than the love of God. So that was my aim, to make it as non-chick cartoony as possible, which I hope I've succeeded in.
And you're right, the artistic enterprise is filled with counterculture or rubbing against the grain or taking the opposing view. It is, by nature, challenging convention.
Yeah, It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's sorry if I've understood the sort of what you're saying. I do apologise. You're a little bit faint on this side, so I apologise if it's because we're so far away as well. It is a very challenging, very difficult as Christians, isn't it, to sort of, we need to go by biblical standards, but at the same time, letting God be the ultimate decider. Sorry, Tony, is that what you were kind of referring to?
Well, I mean, even those who would say, admit there is divinity, there is a God, a Godhead, and why is there evil? Why have a persona in the devil if God is all powerful and capable? Why not just eliminate the threat altogether and have no necessity for that rub, so to speak? And then there's
it's one of those questions. I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it? There's been many times I've been trying to get through to the Atheist Experience TV show, because that question comes up so many times, and it's very hard because it's one of these things we'll never fully grasp this side of life, I guess. And I never have the answer for that. I always just try and be able to say, I just don't know, and that, probably down to the fall, and then, but why me? Why was that person who lives a bad life? Why have they, had everything good, whereas I've lived well, and this has happened to me? That's a very difficult one. Never quite know how to. Yeah, and it's almost like a back-out option to say, I don't really know how to answer that. It's very difficult. I'm always stuck with that one.
Well, I mean, those are the pondering moments of Job and those who looked upon him in disdain in his suffering and pain, and yet his faith continued to glow and believe that there was some bigger purpose behind all of this. And the artist page, what you have are a book that really delves into those contradictory approaches to life and philosophies of life. The artist page, this small group of people, they're able to create a masterpiece out of the conflict?
I guess, I mean, the artist has, he's created the genius. I guess it's down to what the viewers see, and trying to work out, they've just kind of seen the result, but then the result gets bigger with, the complications of life, like you say, and Tony, that's a good point, with good and evil, and, we could do that in volume 2.
Of course. The sun is a wonderful object. It's in the sky. We see it, appreciate it. It creates life. But you get too close or at the wrong angle, and suddenly life becomes extremely hazardous because of that sun.
Exactly.
And so that's a good way to think about the artist page.
I think. Thank you, Tony. That's exactly. That was one of the things that I think everything looks so, appears so well designed, and even with DNA, it's not just a random. It's very carefully constructed code. It's not sort of a random pattern, and everything's almost too perfect. I mean, we get hiccups in nature, but the very fact that we have design in the first place, it's incredibly hard. Again, I don't want to judge the atheist, but for me it's incredibly hard to believe that this just came about through one accident causing further accidents, and then we get this order at the end of it. It's very hard to, can't get my head around that one.
I love the artwork, audience, if you haven't looked yet, to fully appreciate Debra Rufini and her work. The illustration was done by Dino, is that right?
Dina Callow. She's a genius. Forget about the story. Her artwork is a genius.
And the black and white, and if you study closely the faces, you'll see unique configurations. in the one image, the hand of another is actually propping up the chin of a man, or there are scowls of either pain, anguish, or disgust. So I think just about every human emotion is reflected here. Although I don't see much by way of laughter, I would say we have a couple of smiles, but mostly concern.
Yeah, that's kind. She's been very clever in summing up the whole lot. Again, it's a lot of bafflement and what do we make of this? But there's more smiles towards the end, especially with the. I like the one extreme to the other, where the centre page you've got the artist, Jesus with his head in his hands. Oh my goodness, very very sad that for those that don't recognise who he is. And then right at the end, you've got the group that say, we congratulate you on what you've done, and we see you. And the last picture is he's a happy man. He's a happy creator.
Audience,
she's summed that up so well. She's very very clever, Dina Callow. Yeah, she's, I couldn't have asked for a better illustrator. I mean, she was a friend, but so I got it all done for free.
Well, incredible.
An illustrator would have been. But she's the best person I could have had for the job.
Yeah, just incredible.
She's done it very well.
Very nice and well done. Thank you to both of you for putting this together. Audience, if you visit ArtistFirst.com and you select the link for Amazon.com for our guest this hour, you'll see exactly what Debra and I are talking about. And then you can also see the back cover, which represents a number of animals.
Yes, aren't they wonderful? Very detailed.
Yeah, so we have lamb and chickens and whatever. I mean, we have frogs, we have birds. So we have a donkey, I think, back here. So yeah, there's a number of other interests. A squirrel, and so yeah, I like the way that it's almost like there's a human companion,
Yes, it's very cleverly done. It's very. I'm not singing her praises now. Very cleverly put together. And she's made it very attractive. And it's just so complementary to the story. I mean, we'd only had one meeting, and we got together and discussed how we were going to work with this. And I just gave the story to her, and she just comes up with this brilliance that you see before you. And so it's she's made it come to life, should we say? Made the story come to life.
It's a collaborative effort, It isn't just one thing, and I love that about the piece. It's brief. The brevity makes it enjoyable. It's affordable. It's a Kindle, right? I think $2.99 or something.
Paperback and Kindle, yeah.
And so appropriate for all ages, and just has the right amount of character, of thought-provoking conversation and artful play. So the artist page, a poem by Debra Rufini, illustrated by, did you say Deanna or
Dina, D-I-N-A, Callow, K-A-L-O.
And you will just love it, audience. Now, if you're on Facebook, make sure you tell your Facebook friends about the book. And now, is it it's one long? Is it a series of poems? I'm trying to collect my thoughts.
It's basically one long story.
That's what I thought.
Form.
Yeah, one long story.
Yeah, it's quite a long but short story, long poem. And I was also very privileged to have by kind permission Mr. Bruce Sudano, who's Donna Summer's widower, to give me his song "Rainy Day Soul" to accompany the YouTube trailer. I think it's under "Does God Exist?" the YouTube trailer for the artist page. But that was nice to have him on board, because the late great Donna Summer was a Christian, and she was firm believer in our Lord, and it was nice to have him, with his very fitting piece to accompany the trailer, which meant a lot to me as a big Donna Summer fan.
So, as a poet, a lover of prose, do you have some favorite poem or poetry that you enjoy reading, a poet that you have favored, that you enjoy modeling yourself after, perhaps?
Oh, crumbs. I never paid attention to English at school, so but I think it was, as I got older, kind of getting into music and loving songs that were proper stories that rhyme. I've always loved rhyme, and especially when it's put in stories that rhyme and unpredictable rhyme as well. So I guess it's people like
Jethro Tull.
Sorry, I sound like I have no class. So I'm not mentioning Keats. I'm mentioning Springsteen and
Led Zeppelin.
Benatar. Jethro.
The Beatles, they didn't write anything very long, right? I mean, the Beatles, they had a couple albums, but I don't think nothing of great poetry that tells a story and that has the music drama along with it, and Indigata de Vida audience. You go do your Google search for that one. Indigata de Vida. And so, that idea that you have a story, a poem that you can tell at some length, and then perhaps have musical score accompanying. Maybe that'll be the next step for this.
Do you know, I would absolutely, it's funny you say that, Tony, because I would absolutely love that. I mean, you take a Springsteen song, a good one can go on for like 15 minutes, and it's got no structure, and that would work very well with this, with no chorus, bridge, verse. I would, if anyone could offer that would be great, but someone would have to sing because I'm completely tone deaf.
Well, I don't know. Now, we're privileged at Artist First Radio, ArtistFirst.com, to have Artie Kornfeld, one of the founders of the 1969 Woodstock. He has a broadcast on our network and has featured many of those entertainers that were there at the 1969 Woodstock. And actually, Artie Kornfeld was the gentleman who got the acts to sign on to creating the 1969 Woodstock movie.
My goodness, great.
And
I have that. It's wonderful.
And so I would recommend visiting ArtistFirst.com, selecting Artie Kornfeld. You'll see his name there, and look at some of the guests that he's had on, and if you'd like, reach out to him, who may know of someone who could create what you're looking for.
Oh, that would be lovely.
Authors today have the internet in a way that, wow, it's just amazing for writing, for creative work, for marketing purposes, getting your message out there. But the tools available today for artists of all types and flavors are just amazing. And distance is no object. You might find a composer in Germany producing work in Hollywood or New York or vice versa, right? Yeah. The internet has really closed the gap of creativity to where we can bring our material immediately to
That's
to
quite
topic.
true. That is encouraging. I mean, as much as I moan, because I am a complete technophobe, it's amazing that I've managed to make this call, really.
Yeah.
But it is the plus side is that you've got a whole world at your fingertips, haven't you? And that is very good.
It is. And
what
so,
did you do before that? You went into a library. You had to go into a library and look things up.
Yeah. And time-consuming, and then you may have copyright issues and infringement issues to overcome as well, right? In putting together your final work. But today, we can overcome a lot of those handicaps pretty quickly. And
it's very advantageous. We've come a long way in the last couple of decades, I think.
Yeah. I mean, to be able to get a work right now, the artist page off of Amazon, you could just click right through and immediately make the purchase and have the product while the interview's happening.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Think about that. There was a day where, I heard an artist, I love the book or I love the music, and then you went to the music store or the bookstore and you try to remember, and you might hum the tune, you know, or try to remember the author's name and struggle until you found the volume or the piece you were looking for. But today, it's just instant gratification, you know. It's
just there, isn't it? I remember going to, back in the 80s, aging me, ordering a box set from, I think it was HMV or something, and it took from America, and it took 2 weeks to come through. And now it's just, like you say, it's a click of a button, and
that's it.
It may take a bit of time, but you had to physically go into the shop and fill out a form. And
now, the other great benefit for artists today, if you're an author, you can make a video.
Yes.
And you film it, you make it however you want, and it just helps give the reader or listener another opportunity to capture the essence of the material.
Yeah, that's right. It's incredible. Just YouTube itself, you can, watch anything, or even things that you. Going back to Donna Summer, but when I was starting to be a big fan, there was very, very limited, and now anything she's ever done, you just YouTube. Everything's on YouTube. That's great.
Well, you were born in 71. My oldest was born in 78.
Oh.
Yeah, that's how old Tony Kaye is.
You sound much more youthful.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're still young.
I joined the United States Army in 1974. So
Did
I
you?
was already out of high school and off to the Army as a young man.
The wee nipper.
Yep, when you were just a small babe, 2 or 3 years old. And you were blessed to have been born in a good country, a safe country, one where opportunities for intellectual advancement and well-being were everywhere. And so you grew up in an environment where your parents were working and they were loving, and they wanted you to have all of the blessings of the Christian life. Your father ultimately retired, right, as a minister. And so he was very passionate about his faith in Jesus Christ and anxious to pass that on to you. Now, do you have other siblings?
Yes, I have an older sister. She's 4 years older, Jane. I've been very blessed with I'm often thankful that I was brought up in a loving Christian home. There are some people that, and I think also that's why I'm quite passionate about, the whole unconditionally loving God and the love of God, rather than this whole zooming in on the fear aspect first and foremost. And I couldn't have asked for a kinder, more loving Christian home where there was no sort of condemnation or it was. And my dad was he still preaches sometimes in small country churches, and he was always an inspiration as well because he was a good speaker, and I'm being biased, but he is.
And
so
today, for you now, a significant other?
Sorry?
Do you have a husband now?
No, I'm divorced at the moment.
I was just wondering, because in the photograph available at Amazon, it appeared that you were leaning on a gentleman. But that might be some other option.
I'm just trying to think.
Yeah, you'll have to check it out. So,
okay.
So you're available, audience. We have a single lady on the phone. It's not a dating show, but now you know. And you never know where. Hey, I told you the world is gotten smaller with the internet, right? And we are able to meet people, To be an author, to be a poet, to enjoy that type of lifestyle, and thought process. It can be solitary work. How did you find time to think and ponder and write?
I think, well, that the actual the artist page itself was one night's worth of insomnia, and I think it actually came about after I watched I think it was called The Root of All Evil. It was I don't know if you had it in the States, but it was a Richard Dawkins program, and he was basically wiping the floor with theists. And there was kind of I felt there was an angry element to this about possibly, again, it's not my place to judge, but the impression I got was maybe he was more angry than disbelieving, because it was almost like a mission, his mission to, got to be careful what I say, haven't I? Because I think he's a very clever man, and I think he does speak a lot of wisdom, but I think it's, sometimes I wonder if staunch atheists are looking so far that they're missing the point. And but I think watching that program just made me. I wonder how many people that class themselves atheistic, if they're more. I think sometimes it can be sincere disbelief, and I think sometimes maybe something has happened to maybe turn their back on God, turn their back on the church, and because I think sometimes we Christians can be the worst for wrecking someone's faith, and I always find that very sad when it's a matter of maybe spiritual abuse, or so that's why, as much as I trying to feel compassion for Professor Dawkins, wondering, thinking it's a shame, if anything, if he had a glimmer of faith that something, maybe unanswered prayer or something happened along the way. There's been many times when, I've seen that in my own life with people, and I just feel it's so sad, and must sadden God as well.
Not everyone receives the gospel. Jesus sent out 70 and then said, hey, if they don't welcome you, just brush off the dust and keep on walking. And then when they returned, he wanted to know what was their report, what were people saying and thinking. And, of course, that's all over the board, too. So he gave the parable of the sower of the seed who throws it out. And sometimes the seeds, do well and grow and create fruit, and other times they're choked out from the cares and worries of life. So it is a mystery to say, why is it that two people in the same family or two people in the same building could have totally different points of view about the same topic, and that is a mystery, isn't it?
It is a mystery, isn't it? It's very hard, isn't it? Because something I've always battled with, I guess, is, if I knew I had 24 hours to live, I think I'd be panicking. I'd be panicking in case I'd be sent to hell or there was eternal oblivion. And so when that thought hits me, I think to myself, crumbs, am I truly saved then? What if, and the whole doubt thing. But I think, at the end of the day, I like to think, I still think there's many things that we don't know, in this side of life, but I like to think that God is big enough to judge each individual heart by what they've known or what they've been capable of knowing, that the best that they can believe. And, I guess it's about... I'm just trying to think. So I'm trying to think of a Bible verse. Is it "Lord, help me with" something about getting belief in unbelief? Oh, what's that? Sorry, Tony, it's gone.
Well, yes, we want God to help us with our unbelief because we all have that. You know, we don't want to walk by faith. We want to walk by sight. We want to know for sure that there's a step in front of us, that, you know, and that we're not going to fall into the abyss. And so there is this desire to have, because we live in a material substance. We are flesh. Everything, we eat it, we taste it, we see it, we have the senses, we smell it, and therefore that is reality. And anything that's outside of those five senses, how do we know for certainty that that is a reality? We don't. We know our senses as reality and nothing beyond that, unless something extraordinary occurs, right? Yeah. And so people will die, and then they'll go somewhere, and they might come back in their spirit and rejoin their body and suddenly recognize that there is something beyond in a spiritual dimension that we can't observe.
That's right. And that's interesting, isn't it, with you referring to people who have NDEs, near-death experiences.
Yeah, and there are certain universals that can be collected from that experience, regardless of culture, whether they are Buddhist, whether they are Hindu, whether they're Christian or Muslim. There are certain principles of universal experience beyond this existence that become the compelling message of all religion.
Yeah, I think that's... Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes you've got to look at the things we do know rather than what we don't know, and I think that's an encouraging thing. I'm just trying to think of the guy's name, Dr. Richard... I'm looking at my bookshelf right now because I have a book by him. I can't think what his name is. He's done... he's a Christian, but a medical doctor, and I think he's a cardiologist. He's done lots of cases of reported near-death experiences where, irrespective of one's faith, they've all seemed to have a similar, you know, kind of very joyous experience going towards the light, and quite often meeting with people that have passed on. And I think a lot of that can be the best evidence maybe that we can get, because we don't hear of people meeting people that are still alive. And even people that have been blind from birth, they've come back to report things that only the sighted could see. You know, and it's
and you know, what's the point of the gospel? It is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and without it, it's an empty promise. If Jesus would have died on that cross, been buried, and that would have been it, and they all just walked away. Or if he would have come back in some other nebulous spiritual, I'm a ghost figure, that wouldn't have been very powerful. But when he could say, here, behold, touch me, feel my flesh, when you could see him eating, and he would appear over a 40-day period to as many as 500, that was the catalyst. You are my witnesses of the life, witnesses that you saw me die on that cross. I was completely dead. My body had no life in it. You buried me for 3 days, and here I am before you, proof positive that there is a promise, a hope that is a surety, a guarantee that life goes on beyond the grave. And so we have that as our faith. And so Jesus then I'm not a witness, but there were enough of them that they were able to archive and record what we call the Gospels and the New Testament books, canonize them 300 years after the fact, but nonetheless, they were in use for those 300 years. They didn't just fall from the sky one day and become the canon of the Bible. They existed by hundreds, by thousands of letters all over Christianity, all over the empire, and they were collected and analyzed, and the ones that were held the most sacred won the day and ended up being in there. So it is an act of faith that we now rest on the witnesses who died by stoning, by hanging, by their faith was so magnified by that physical presence that the Saul of Tarsus could fall blinded from his light and glory and move on to write 13 of the 27 books of the New Testament. So
that's pretty amazing.
That's a powerful, he was the one out getting all of the Christians and bringing them to judgment so they could be crucified and judged. And what a turnabout that he needed Barnabas and he needed Mark, the disciple of Christ, others to stand up and say, hey, he's an all right guy. He's seen the light. He's seen Jesus himself. And honor what he teaches. So, but even there, people would turn. Oh well, you can't trust the Bible, and it's been rewritten by white men or whoever. I mean, if they want to have a fight about it, they're going to find something to throw under the bus. And I always say, have you read Mark?
Yeah.
Start there.
Yes. Sure.
And then see if this character we call Jesus is compelling enough for you to read maybe another one.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I typically find by the agnostic or the atheist, that they really haven't considered the person, nor have they considered the writing in detail enough to be influenced by its message, to be warmed, to have the Holy Spirit enter their mind and their heart and massage it and allow the sin in their life to be exposed and the forgiveness that's offered to be welcomed. All of that has to happen on a personal level. We hope and pray that our oratory, our preachers, our pastors, our priests are conveying a lifestyle in that message. But today, with print, with the Bible at hand, there's no excuse. You can go check it out for yourself and discover.
Again, I don't want to put judgment on. I do find in conversations with atheists or that talk show, the call-in show, very interesting. But I think most of the hosts have been. Most of them Christian or some sort of, they have been atheist at some point. And I find that interesting. There's only one or two that have just, grown up just assuming there's no God, and they're hosting a show. The fact that they have been, one of them was training to be a Baptist minister. It does seem as if there is a bit of anger involved that kind of stopped the fact that they were so on fire at some point to begin with. And it's
failed expectations. Come on, Judas, the apostle, believed that Christ would have an earthly kingdom, and really found himself disillusioned by Christ in his decision to have a much broader kingdom than Judas could accept or understand. Mm. And so bitterness does set in when expectations aren't satisfied. How could God let my mom, my wife, my child die? How, if there was a God, why is there so much pain and suffering in the world? If there's a God, all of that, right? You can go down that path of negativity and focus on that to its ultimate end, and that is destruction.
Yeah.
That is a life of, hedonism. It's I have the moment, and so take pleasure in that, because tomorrow we die. And after all, there's nothing after that. You're like Rover. You're dead all over. So if that's the philosophy that you go down, well, then go ahead. What are you going to do? Offer hope, offer opportunity to rediscover or to consider that maybe your brain isn't that big, and so God may have a longer vision of the beginning, the middle, and the end, and so therefore this is the outcome, right? And I don't know. I think that all of us go through a journey. We take different paths along the way. And the artist page reflects that. Your book reflects the paths that people take for whatever reason. Yeah,
I've tried to make that happen. But I think it's interesting, isn't it? That I think consciousness, we don't know an awful lot about it, and that's one thing that Professor Dawkins doesn't often, because he is a biologist after all, so they're focusing on the physical alone, assuming that we fizzle out like batteries after our body has cracked up. But what about consciousness? That's kind of, and they've done studies, I think, haven't they, that consciousness, we'll go back to near-death experience, but other things that consciousness doesn't, our brain cells are kind of dying and reproducing all the time, but you'd think if our consciousness was limited to our brain, then our memories would be wiped out every time that happens, but we still keep our memories, and I think they don't tend to want to focus too much on that. It's all about, I think also they're so obsessed with just evolution and that, supposedly disproving God, and there's certain things that they don't want to look at. But it amazes me, Tony, there's the kind of fundamentalist atheists are spending a large proportion of their time, this limited, I was going to say God-given time, but they wouldn't see it like that, limited time spent on the earth to ridicule and dismiss something they don't believe in. And you think, my goodness, I'd have better things to do, really. We have a message because we believe it's good news. And, even with my occasional doubts that I've expressed in the beginning of the artist page, that it's still trying to get people to look at the things we do know.
What was it like before the advent of Thomas Edison and Tesla and electricity, the light bulb, the world as we know it today? What was it like? Yeah. Come on. I think that's difficult for people to comprehend. They have their cell phones in hand. They're listening to us right now on their Android, and the portability and YouTube and all of the things that we have today. Think about it. There was no microwave oven. There was no electricity. And so you had a candle, you had a lamp, you got up when the birds started chirping, and you went to sleep when the sun went down. What about before there was a clock? We used we used sundials for thousands of years. We didn't have a stopwatch. We measured distance by the length of our arm. And so that, come on. And we built magnificent structures on that basis, engineering feats that survive to this very day. How do we measure time? How do we measure a dimension of space that's outside of matter, outside of time and space? And so I have no conflict with the universe being billions of years old. Well, gee, that's just a little spot in a little speck of sand in the space of infinity. Of always was. A few billion years is like yesterday, like it just happened, right?
Yes.
And so that's what I think, that those who challenge, question, or think that the existence of dinosaurs or the age of the universe, or they keep discovering new things. They just through the Hubble discovered a universe that has no detectable black matter. And yet we know that the whole universe has black matter everywhere, and that's what holds it all together. But they found a universe that doesn't have any. So, they continue to discover new things. Science discovers new things all the time and have to rewrite, and even physics. Okay, well, in our universe, in our space, physics work this way. But all of a sudden, I look out into space and I find another realm of existence, another place where those laws don't apply.
Yeah, it's crazy to make assumptions of disbelief by things we just don't know. I tend to think of it a bit like a goldfish in its bowl, situated in one part of the room.
Yeah.
It can only see
that
from
much.
its angle a certain part of the room. It can't comprehend the rest of the room, or the fact that the room is one of many in a whole house, the fact that the house is one of many in a whole road, the fact that the road is one of many in a town.
Yeah.
We only see just a small part of where we're from, and it makes it exciting, but it's we're really limiting the mind and ability of God to.
If we're at the center of our universe, it's a black hole, and we're standing there. What significance is our tiny speck of dust?
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's just a little speck of dust. It's nothing. What does it matter? It's just a little piece of dust. And yet, we ourselves, in our essence, are stardust.
Yes. Oh, yes. It's fascinating.
So we're
absolutely fascinating. But still, even if you did have all this physical matter putting together a body, it would still just be a corpse. I think the very thing that makes it alive and is breath of life consciousness.
Yeah.
It may be physically working, but we wouldn't have any self-awareness of the body.
Well, I love the atheists because they usually have a pet or two. And they'll love that little doggy or that little kitty cat, or you know what I mean? And they'll give it a personality. They'll say, "Oh, they have my dog or my cat." And they know like it's a human being, right?
Yeah.
And so then, well, if that's the case, why would you challenge or question that there is a spiritual entity behind the makings of the universe and everything else? Because look at yourself. You're like a god, and you can even love the simplest little thing over here. You might even have a pet rock and paint it and pet it. Yeah. Okay. So if you're capable of such things, what's to say there isn't a superior intellect out there that has that same compassion and caring and feeling and concern and provision? What does the Bible say? God causes it to rain for the just and the unjust. He is no respecter of persons. That each human being on this little dot called Earth has an opportunity to struggle at what we call life. And whether you're in the jungle or whether you're in a big city, another jungle, you're still are with all creation crying out and singing songs of praise for another day to take breath and take in the lushness of our space we call Earth, right?
Yeah.
And
I always sorry.
Yeah, and so I see that those who have agnostic or atheistic points of view really are overlooking their own level of humanity and spirituality that's so evident. It's like the nose on their face.
I think so, and I find it quite interesting that their stumbling block quite often seems to be what created God. And you think, well, you've either got to you have to ask a further question where you either have to start with either nothing created everything or something created something. You have to have a first cause. Even though we can't answer, we can't explain in detail fully what that first cause. We know it's God, but everything about God at this side of life we don't know. But it's silly to say. I find it silly to kind of even say, well, God can't exist because what created God? You have to start by a first cause.
Every time someone passes away, I think to myself, well, now they know.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it just takes that.
Yeah.
You know.
It does. And I like to think that God does. He will give us every opportunity, even at the point when we're breathing our last. He will, because He wouldn't want anyone to be lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's a journey. It's a journey. It's going to continue somewhere, somehow, toward meeting what we know are these ideals and this image that we've been told is divine, that we should pursue these most excellent virtues. Well, maybe we can't get it all done now. Well, I believe our Catholic brothers and sisters over there believe in purgatory. Well, isn't that a place of purging, a place where sin can be cast out and we could be refined and made, you know, in other words, isn't it a place where we can continue that purification process and that journey toward understanding? Because are we that capable that we can just, well, I know it all now. I know Christ and now I know everything. No, I don't think so. I don't think that you can say I've known Jesus and now I'm going to walk like He did the best I can, but it's a journey. It's not a destination. I'm not going to say, well, look at me, I'm most righteous now. You know, I've purified myself completely through Jesus Christ, and therefore there's no...
The church needs to be filled with more people like you, Tony.
I've been purified by the blood of the Lamb, Jesus Himself, and therefore my journey, I've reached the destination. And it's not. It isn't. No. It's every day, take up your cross and follow me. What? A cross? Gee, if you would have lived into the first century and somebody said to you, hey, take up a cross and start following me. What? I mean, they would know what that feels like, what it smells like. They've seen it in the street, people being hung by them, dragging them around. And here's the leader of our spirituality telling us to take up a cross and follow him. Are you nuts?
Yeah.
Who wants to do that? You want to cower in fear and run away from that admonition. And yet, to the first century Christians, it was a badge of honor. They counted all joy for the suffering and the loss to have known Christ and to celebrate His life, death, and resurrection. So it's about perspective and point of view and making faith relevant through time, And I think that the basic element of humanity has remained the same since the very beginning. From Adam and Eve.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, that we are
absolutely
by nature sinners, by nature corrupt, selfish, hedonistic, and in need of daily purging. So it's refreshing to hear an artist and a Christian put it out there in this fashion. And I know that whether you're an atheist, an agnostic, or a Christian, you will enjoy the artist page for its prose, for its content, for the imagery, the artwork on the front and the back, and just that element of contemplation. So, audience, I invite you to get your Kindle version for $2.99 at Amazon.com, and be sure to share our guest, Debra Rufini, and her work with everyone you know on your social network sites. It's an exciting thing. Now that you have this out there, it's a published work. It's for the public to buy and enjoy. What are your thoughts? Will there be a sequel, or will you continue writing, perhaps in a different genre of material?
Oh my goodness, I haven't. I haven't thought that far ahead. Yeah, possibly. Give me some inspiration there, Tony. I do like...
Yeah.
I wouldn't be very good at writing a novel. I wouldn't be I wouldn't produce something like The Shack, for instance.
But you love poetry. Come on. You mean you don't have anything laying around, just this one work.
I don't at the moment. It's been... I've spent a lot of time trying to promote this book. But I think, maybe I do need to have a little writing spree soon, and I need something to inspire me.
Yeah, well,
conversation.
Make it to your local coffee shop. Tea shop, and get yourself a bit of tea and a muffin, and start watching.
Scones in Britain, Tony, scones. Well, not scones. It's got to be pronounced scones. It's got an E on the end.
Absolutely. And, a magic can happen, right? You don't know.
Yeah.
You never know. Tony K may show up one day and be there.
Oh,
yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes, you never know.
That sounds good.
Thank you, Debra, for supporting the arts, joining us this hour to talk about your book, your illustrations, all that you're doing. Keep up the good work. Get the message out there. Now, do you have another website that we should be telling our audience about?
I don't have a website, but I am on Facebook under the artist page. Or anyone can email me at all lowercase Debra Rufini at yahoo.co.uk.
Well, thank you for joining us. And before I let you go, anyone out there on planet Earth you'd like to say hello to or closing remarks for our listeners?
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And, thank you for anyone listening. And it's been an honor to talk with you. And again, I couldn't have done it without the amazing Dina Kello. And just thank you very much, Tony. It's hugely appreciated. It's been great to talk with you.
Thanks for joining us from across the pond. We'll see you next time, okay?
That would be great. God bless you all.